Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at this digital version of Azif, the Necronomicon.pdf. It's a text that claims to reveal, well, quite a lot, actually. Ancient beings, forbidden rituals, really unsettling things about, well, reality itself.
You know, one of the first things that grabs me about this e-text is that it claims to be, well, it claims to come from a physical copy.
Oh, yeah?
And potentially even be a translation of John Dee's Leberloga.
No, John Dee, that's a name that sends shivers down any occult enthusiast's spine, right?
Exactly right. And then you add on top of that the potential connection to Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, and it just gets more and more intriguing, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like the author took these threads of real history, you know?
Right.
We've got figures like Abdul Alhazred, we've got John Dee, these whispers of ancient texts that are lost to time. And they've kind of woven them into this tapestry of cosmic horror. But how do we even begin to separate fact from fiction here? I mean, what can we actually take away from this digital version of the Necronomicon?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? And I think you're right to point out that the text itself seems almost self-aware. It's almost like it's playing with the reader a little bit.
Right.
You know, it dangles these figures in front of you, these historical events, these names, and it makes you wonder if there's a grain of truth, a kernel of truth buried somewhere beneath all of this.
Yeah, and that's it's a brilliant tactic, but it's also kind of unsettling, isn't it?
It is.
Because you're drawn in by the familiar, the names, these anchors to our reality, and then suddenly, bam, you're thrown into this world of old ones and cosmic dread.
Exactly.
So let's start there. Who are these old ones that we're being warned about in the Necronomicon?
Well, the Necronomicon paints a pretty chilling picture, I have to say. It describes these old ones as beings of immense power. They predate humanity. They came to Earth from the stars.
And they were here first.
They were here first.
Yeah.
They reigned supreme, you know, in this primordial era before being imprisoned by even older entities. And these entities they're referred to as the Elder Lords.
See, even older, like it just keeps going back and back.
Exactly, yeah. It's like this almost like an onion of cosmic dread that you're peeling back.
It's giving me chills just thinking about it.
I can imagine. Well, and the text itself doesn't hold back. It claims they swarmed forth in their multitudes and darkness ruled the earth. So not exactly a peaceful arrival.
No, not a peaceful arrival at all. And the way they're described, the language that's used, it's bone-chilling. Passages like, beneath the oceans they brooded, and as foulness you shall know them, and their accursedness shall stain the earth. I mean, that just doesn't sound like anyone I want to be having tea with.
Right. You wouldn't want to invite them over for dinner. No, these lines they're definitely evocative and disturbing. But I think when we zoom out a little bit and look at them in a broader context, we actually start to see echoes of ancient creation myths that are found in a lot of different cultures.
Right.
You see these primordial beings, these figures of chaos, and they embody this kind of darkness, a darkness that predates humanity. And a lot of times this represents the unknown.
That makes sense.
Think about Tiamat in Babylonian mythology, for example, or Apophis in Egyptian mythology. These are beings of immense power. They're often associated with chaos, with destruction, and they exist long before humans ever walked the earth.
It is fascinating how these kind of universal fears, they manifest in different cultures in such similar ways. But the Necronomicon, it doesn't just speak in these kind of broad strokes, does it? It gets very specific.
Oh, yeah.
With its old ones. We're talking Thulu, Yog-Sothoth, Hastur, Shub-Niggurath, even Nyarlathotep gets a mention. And these names alone, they hold a certain power, don't they?
They do. And that's another one of these layers to this text that's so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because you have some of these names that are clearly coming from Lovecraft's imagination. Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, those are Lovecraft. But then you have others that have roots that go back much further.
Oh, really?
Hastur, for example, appears in late 19th century literature before Lovecraft. It's possible even that name is drawing on ancient mythology.
Wow. Okay, so maybe not just Lovecraft then.
Right. Even Nyarlathotep, which sounds very Lovecraftian, seems to have echoes of ancient Egyptian words.
So it's like the author was very deliberately taking the familiar and mixing it with the deeply unsettling.
Yes.
And speaking of unsettling, I mean, the way these entities are described, they're vivid to say the least. We have Cthulhu, this monstrous entity trapped beneath the ocean just waiting to rise. You've got Yog-Sothoth, this being who's so vast it exists outside of time and space. In fact, it's described as the gate that the old ones will use to return.
Oh.
It makes you wonder, Even if these are fictional, do these descriptions tap into some kind of primal fear that's resonated with humanity for centuries?
That's a great question. And it's at the heart of what makes these archetypes so powerful, isn't it? The slumbering god, the cosmic gate, the idea that something ancient and powerful might be lurking just beyond our understanding.
Right.
Those are concepts that we find woven into the fabric of human storytelling across cultures and throughout history.
Wow.
And that's where things get even more interesting with this, because this version of the Necronomicon, it doesn't just tell you about these beings, it also claims to instruct you, to show you how to interact with them.
You're talking about the rituals and the incantation.
Exactly. Yes.
Because some of these instructions were incredibly detailed. You had times, dates tied to astronomical events, lists of ingredients that sounded like they belong in a medieval apothecary, instructions for creating, these magical tools. It was almost like the author was trying to make it seem very, very authentic.
Precisely. And that's, I think, where the line between fantasy and reality gets especially blurry with this text.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you have these fantastical creatures and this cosmic horror.
Wow.
And then on the other hand, you have these meticulous instructions, almost like you said, like a cookbook for summoning cosmic dread.
Exactly. It's a cookbook for something you don't want to eat.
Exactly. And that juxtaposition, I think, is what makes it so compelling and frankly, unsettling.
Absolutely. So let's get into some of the specifics then, okay?
Okay.
One that really kind of jumped out at me was this 11-stone configuration that's supposed to open a gateway.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
The 11-stone configuration, that's a fascinating one, isn't it? You know, the use of stones and rituals is something that we see across cultures and throughout history.
Yeah.
Think about Stonehenge. Think about the stone circles that you find all over Europe and beyond. These structures, they often align with astronomical events, and it seems very likely that they served some kind of ceremonial purpose.
Right.
Now, whether the Necronomicon's 11-stone configuration is directly related to any of those real-world practices is debatable.
Sure.
But it's hard not to see some kind of echo there.
Yeah, like the author is drawing on something real, something primal.
I think so. You know, it taps into our fascination with the power of these ancient sites, and it suggests at least a way to access hidden forces, and it does this through ritual and through symbolism, which again we see in so many different traditions.
So it's like the author took something real, amplified it, and then plugged it into this fictional narrative.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just the stones, right? There was also this whole section on creating this incense of Scalba, and it was said to have this powerful effect on spirits. But even the ingredient list itself was, I don't know, it was intriguing. Myrrh, civet, storax, wormwood, asafoetida, galbanum, musk. What are we even dealing with here?
It's a fascinating list, isn't it? And again, you have this blend of the familiar and the strange. So you have ingredients like myrrh, frankincense,
Right.
which have documented uses in rituals and perfumery going back centuries.
Of course.
But then you also have ingredients like asafoetida, which is known for its pungent odor. Let's just say that.
Right. Not exactly a crowd pleaser.
Not necessarily something you want to diffuse in your living room exactly.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's included here, along with these other ingredients and these very specific instructions, it suggests this deliberate attempt to create an atmosphere of otherworldliness, perhaps even to try to induce altered states of consciousness.
Right, like you're trying to shift your awareness somehow. It's almost like the author wanted to create an experience, a sensory experience that would convince you, if only for a moment, that you were stepping outside the realm of the ordinary into something else.
I agree.
But it wasn't just the incense, was it? There were also instructions on how to create magical tools, like the Scimitar of Barzai.
You're right.
Which required this elaborate ritual to imbue it with power.
The Scimitar of Barzai is a great example of how the Necronomicon is drawing on another tradition that we find across cultures, which is the creation and the use of ritual objects. And the important thing to remember about these objects, it's not just the object itself, it's the intention, the belief that's imbued in it through this process, through this ritual. So the specific inscriptions on the scimitar, the elaborate steps for its creation, these all speak to this much broader tradition.
So even if we say, okay, these rituals, they're not going to work exactly as described in this text, we can still appreciate the level of detail that went into it, the thought that went into creating this whole system of magic and belief.
I think so, yeah.
It speaks to the power of belief itself in a way. But it does lead us to a pretty important question.
Yeah.
How do we, as readers in the 21st century, how do we even approach a text like this? I mean, is this a genuine grimoire, a work of fiction, or something in between? And what does it say about us? What does it say about our own fascination with the unknown that we're even asking these questions?
That's the question, isn't it? That's the million-dollar question right there. And I think the Necronomicon, I mean, in all its forms, all the different interpretations out there, it continues to fascinate people and disturb people precisely because it's so hard to categorize. It's like this weird blend of...
It really is.
Of belief and disbelief, history and imagination.
It's like trying to grab onto smoke, you know?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have these elements that are clearly pulled from real mythology, real occult practices from around the world, but then you turn the page and it's like, bam, cosmic horror, you know, things that just scream fiction. How do you even begin to reconcile those two sides?
Yeah, and I think one of the keys might be to recognize that this line that we draw between what's real and what's fictional, it hasn't always been so rigid, you know? Ancient cultures, they didn't necessarily make the same distinctions that we do between myth and reality.
Oh, interesting.
Myths were explanations for how the world worked, for human emotions, for the very nature of existence itself. Myths were a way to try to grapple with a world that was full of mystery, full of danger.
So even if we're approaching this text, the Necronomicon, as primarily a work of fiction, which, let's be honest, is probably the most likely scenario here.
Sure.
There's still value in examining the themes, the ideas that are underneath, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like we're holding up a mirror to the darkest parts of our own imaginations, and we're seeing our fears, our anxieties about the unknown, all reflected back to us.
I think that's a great way to put it. And it's important to remember, too, that even if we say, okay, the Necronomicon as a physical book, as a real grimoire, even if that's a fabrication, the impact that it's had on our culture, that's undeniable.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's inspired countless books, movies, video games, you name it.
Yeah.
Even music. So the Necronomicon as a concept has become this kind of, this cultural touchstone, a symbol of this forbidden knowledge and this terrifying idea of cosmic dread.
It's incredible to think about, isn't it? I mean, this fictional book it's transcended the page. It's taken on a life of its own.
I know.
And in a way, it's more influential than any of the rituals that it describes.
Yeah.
Which brings us to what I think is the most important question here, and that's why. Why are we, even today, so captivated by this book, by everything that it represents?
That's the question I hope you keep asking yourself, even after this deep dive is over. Why this book? Why these ideas? Maybe it's the allure of forbidden knowledge, that kind of irresistible thrill you get when you peek behind the curtain, when you look into the abyss and catch a glimpse of something that you're not supposed to see, something that you can't really understand. Or maybe it's just a reminder that for all our progress, you know, all our technology, we're still these vulnerable creatures living in this vast and often indifferent universe.
That is a humbling thought. But maybe there's also something empowering about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
About choosing to confront those fears, even if it's in a fictional setting.
Okay.
Because maybe, just maybe, when we confront our fears, even in that way, we gain a little bit of control over them.
I like that. I like that a lot. And who knows, maybe in the process of exploring these myths, these legends, these unsettling possibilities, maybe we discover something true about ourselves, about the universe. If you're interested in learning more about these ideas after today's deep dive, I encourage you to, you know, read up on the history of magic. Maybe check out some Lovecraft, see what all the fuss is about. Or even just pick up some analyses of ancient occult texts.
Just maybe leave the incense of Skaba off the shopping list for now.
That's probably a good call, yeah. But in all seriousness, I mean, the potential for discovery is there. And you never know what you might find when you venture outside of your comfort zone, when you start to look beyond the familiar.
Absolutely. Speaking of venturing outside of the familiar, let's talk about one of the more intriguing aspects of the Necronomicon, the 11-stone configuration.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about this ritual and how it fits into the larger context of the text?
The 11-stone configuration, it's fascinating because it blends these concrete details with this tantalizing ambiguity.
Okay.
You have the text describing 11 stones arranged in a very specific pattern,
Right.
with very specific markings on each stone. And that level of detail, it makes it seem like there might be something real behind it,
Right.
like a real occult practice.
Yeah.
But then you start to look for direct parallels in actual traditions. And it gets murky very quickly.
So no ancient grimoires with matching diagrams then?
Not that I'm aware of.
No hidden temples with 11 stones just waiting to be,
Wouldn't that be something?
I know.
But here's the thing. The use of stones in rituals is incredibly widespread, and particularly when you're talking about altered states of consciousness or communicating with, let's say, otherworldly entities.
Yeah.
It's a recurring motif. Think about all the megalithic structures around the world. Stonehenge, the Karnak stones in France.
Oh, right, of course.
These monuments, they point to this deep fascination that humans have with stones.
Yeah.
Especially when you arrange them in the specific patterns, align them with celestial events. There's something there.
So you're saying it's possible that this 11-stone configuration, it's drawing on this older, more primal understanding of stones.
I think so, yeah. Like you said earlier, it's taking something real, it's amplifying it, and then it's sort of plugging it into this fictional narrative.
Yeah.
As a way to give it that extra oomph. And don't even get me started on the number 11 itself.
But what's significant about 11?
Well, in a lot of esoteric traditions, 11 is associated with things like intuition, inspiration, even transgression.
Really?
Which seems pretty fitting, don't you think, for a ritual that supposedly opens a gateway to realms beyond human comprehension.
Right. Like you're breaking some kind of barrier.
Exactly. It's about pushing beyond those boundaries, those limitations.
So even if the specifics are made up,
Right.
the author knew exactly what they were doing. They were tapping into something real, something powerful.
100%. Whether it's based on a genuine practice or totally fabricated, this 11-stone configuration really gets at the heart of what the Necronomicon does so well. It blurs the lines
It really does.
between what's real and what's imagined.
Yeah.
And it leaves us wondering, what if there's something more to this? What if there really is something beyond what we can see and touch and understand?
It's like the author, they almost understood how to plant these seeds of doubt.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tapping into these ancient fears, these fascinations that we have. But the 11 stones, that's just one piece of the puzzle here.
It is.
There's so many other rituals, so many practices that are outlined in this digital version of the Necronomicon. And one that I found particularly, unsettling, I guess, was the incense of Skauba.
Oh, the incense.
Yeah, the text claims that it can be used to attract and even influence spirits.
Right.
So what's your take on that?
Well, the incense of Skauba, it's a great example of how this text, it blends these very vivid descriptions with these kind of unsettling implications, because you have this very specific recipe with ingredients like myrrh, civet, asafoetida, things that have been used in rituals, in perfumery for centuries, really.
Right, yeah.
But the combination of these scents, some of which are quite pleasant, and others, well, let's just say not so much.
A little pungent.
Yeah, a little pungent. It suggests that the author was really trying to create a very specific atmosphere here, an atmosphere of, otherworldliness, something strange, something different.
It's like they want you to feel like you're not in Kansas anymore.
Exactly. You're stepping outside of your everyday reality.
Right.
And this ties into, the use of incense in a lot of different magical traditions, a lot of religious traditions.
Yeah, for sure.
Throughout history, people have used incense not just to cover up bad smells, but to create a sacred atmosphere, to facilitate meditation, to establish a link, a symbolic link between the mundane world and the divine.
So even if we're a little skeptical,
Of course.
we don't necessarily believe that this incense can actually summon spirits.
Right.
We can still appreciate the fact that it's drawing on these historical associations.
Exactly.
And it adds to this feeling that the Necronomicon is something more than just a story.
I agree. And let's not underestimate the power of suggestion here. If someone were to actually go out, gather these ingredients, follow these instructions very carefully, and light this incense in a dark room, maybe while reciting incantations from this text that claims to hold this forbidden knowledge.
Well, you'd have to be feeling something.
I think you'd probably feel something.
That would be, I mean, that's an experience right there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it brings us back to this fundamental question about the Necronomicon. Is it just a really good story?
Right.
Or is there something more to it, something real, something ancient, something potentially dangerous?
And we may never know the answer to that question.
We may never know.
But that's part of what makes it so fascinating, isn't it?
I think so.
Because we're hardwired to want answers. We want to make sense of the unknown. And the Necronomicon, it offers this glimpse, this tantalizing glimpse into a world that is both terrifying and completely captivating.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that the human imagination, especially when it's focused on the unknown, is a powerful thing, a boundless thing, and sometimes a very unsettling thing.
Well said. Well said. It's been an incredible journey exploring this digital version of the Necronomicon.
It has.
And while we may never know for sure if its secrets hold any real power, I think one thing is clear.
Oh, heck.
It's a reminder that the human imagination, especially when we're dealing with the unknown, is a force to be reckoned with. So to everyone listening, if you're intrigued by what we've discussed today, if you want to learn more, don't stop here. Explore the history of magic. Dive into Lovecraft's work. Research ancient myths and legends. The world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Just remember, as with any journey into the unknown, proceed with curiosity, but also with a healthy dose of skepticism. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and as always, keep the light of knowledge burning bright.